Thank you so much, everyone. It is an honor and a privilege to share my master thesis with you. My name is Michael Academia, a recent graduate from William and Mary, and my advisor was Dr. Brian Watts, who is the director for the Center for Conservation Biology. And our project was about how food supplementation increased the reproductive performance of ospreys in the lower Chesapeake Bay. In this presentation, I'll cover the protocol within 16 to 17 minutes with some time allotted in the end for some questions and answers. Some context, some background information about why we did this study. There is a global concern of the state of our fisheries. This is an illustration from the Food and Agricultural Organization depicting where the trend is going. On the x-axis, we have years. On the y-axis, we have percentage. The proportion represented in orange are the fish stocks that are overfished and unsustainable, and it is growing. This proportion represented in teal are the stocks that are fished at maximum sustainable yield, and it is shrinking. This white line represents the proportion of fish that are underfished, and it is approaching zero. So with this global concern of the state of our fisheries, there's been a paradigm shift from single species, maximum sustainable yield models into a management style that considers trophic interactions. And this is ecosystem-based fisheries management. It is a holistic approach that considers trophic interactions and aims to promote the health and resilience of the ecosystem. And embedded in this style are ecological reference points in which predators can serve as reference points which can allow management to practice informed decisions to develop harvest targets and to assess the role of forage fish for upper trophic levels, such as your bird populations, and they may serve as an early warning system for changes in fish populations that have ecosystem implications. Let's focus our attention to this fish here. This is Atlantic menhaden. It is a type of herring, and it's very high in its lipid content. This fishery began in the 1800s, and it is the largest fishery along the Atlantic coast by volume. However, by the 1960s, factories north of Chesapeake Bay shut down due to fish scarcity, except for one, and that is omega protein. And it's been a big source of contention and conflict. And one of the major issues is they become very efficient in the type of fishing methods. This is purse seining. They surround the schools. They also use spotter planes to help them isolate the schools, and they literally vacuum up all of the fish, and it is worth big business. It's about $6 billion annually. There's lots of lobbyists and political clout. The fish is reduced to your supplements, your fish meal, your fertilizer, and also for bait. According to the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, this fish is not overfished, and overfishing is not occurring. However, we are seeing signs of localized depletion. Another major problem is that Chesapeake Bay serves as a critical nursing ground, and overfishing within close proximity to the nursing grounds is detrimental to the recruitment and sustainability of this fishery. This is an illustration from the Pew Charitable Trust depicting the major ecological service that menhaden provide. They're forage fish, a food base for our most iconic species such as striped bass, loons, bald eagles, and of course, ospreys. And we can't forget about ecotourism and recreational fishing, tragedy of the commons. And again, we are seeing evidence of localized depletion of menhaden. And this is defined as a reduction in the menhaden population density below the level of abundance that is sufficient to maintain its basic ecological, economic, and social cultural functions. So why ospreys? At the Center for Conservation Biology, we have about 4 generations of graduate students that study the relationship between ospreys and menhaden, and this is since the 1970s. Osprey reproductive success is inextricably linked to menhaden abundance. Ospreys are also obligate piscivores. They depend on fish 99+% of the time. They're also the only bird of prey, the only raptor that can fully dive into the water, making them plunge divers, and also more susceptible to the perturbations of the food supply compared to your pursuit divers such as cormorants or loons. They have been substantiated as ecotoxicological sentinel species, specifically for DDT. However, their utility as ecological reference points have not yet been fully explored. The objective of this study was to determine the osprey population within the lower Chesapeake Bay was experiencing food limitation during the 2021 breeding season. Now, a clear barrier to resolve this objective was that there were no abundance data of menhaden available scaled to the local level. If such data were available, we could observe osprey catch rates and provisioning and assess the functional response to the prey density, to menhaden density. However, since no such data were available, a food manipulative experiment in the wild was required. Hence, our main research question: would ospreys experience higher rates of nest success and productivity if they received food supplementation? We hypothesized that ospreys experience food limitation due to the lack of fish availability, and we predicted that treatment increased productivity and nest success. This is a map of Chesapeake Bay in its entirety. These red dots represent osprey nests. Now, it was just impractical to conduct this experiment on this large scale, and based on the years and generations of research from the center, we focused our attention to this area here. This is Mobjack Bay, which has served as a bellwether, a barometer, an adjudicator of the osprey-menhaden relationship. Mobjack Bay consists of the Ware, North, and East Rivers, and also Davis Creek. We had a total sample size of 31. The blue circles represent the food addition nests, while the red triangles represent the control group. Treatment protocols were initiated once eggs hatched to 6 weeks. Menhaden was sourced from a local fishing supply company and was prepared and delivered via telescopic delivery device. If you look to the left, here is that telescopic delivery device. This was engineered and handcrafted by my father, so thank you, Dad. And we delivered 3.4 fish or 472 grams every 3.55 days on average until the young reached 6 weeks of age. Nests within the control group were observed concurrently with the food addition group, and the young were inspected via a mirror pole. If you look to the photo to the right, here is that mirror pole, also engineered and handcrafted by my father. My advisor and I took Will McKeever, who is a writer, filmmaker, out to Chesapeake Bay because he's producing a film on the Chesapeake Bay issue. And hopefully his film will come out at the Sundance Film Festival. And we attached a GoPro to that mirror pole. And you can see the nestlings here. I'm going to play this video. You can hear them. And its mother circling overhead. We also attached a total of 11 trail cameras to our nest so that we could obtain vital information about prey species composition. We also marked the eldest young with red, the middle with blue, and the youngest with green. So from the photos from the trail cameras, we extrapolated very important information about the prey species. We used image J. We took a measurement from a known length, such as the bill or talon, to obtain important information, such as biomass. And we used species-specific length mass equations from published literature. We then converted biomass to energy in terms of kilocalories using published species-specific energy density values. And for the unknown fish, we used length mass equations and energy density from a representative species of the taxonomic group. Here are a few items that I need to define. This is important because these are response variables. A nest is considered successful when a pair raise at least one young to the minimum acceptable age. Fledglings, we define the number of fledglings as the number of young in the nest that reach the 80% first flight age criterion, and productivity is the number of fledglings per active nest. For our statistical analysis, data were non-parametric, non-homogeneous. Therefore, we needed appropriate tools. We used Pearson's chi-squared analysis to compare the relationship between treatment types and nest success. And we used generalized linear models to compare productivity, number of young hatched, and brood reduction, and also to assess the influence of provisioning, natural and supplemented, on productivity. We used RStudio with various packages to create the models and validation tools. All right, we're now in the results. For the food addition group, 13 of the 16 nests succeeded at 81%. 3 nests failed during the first 1.38 weeks, and the productivity rate was 1.13 young per active nest. For the control group, only 5 of the 15 nests succeeded at 33%. 10 nests failed during the first 2.2 weeks, and the productivity rate was 0.47 young per active nest. This is a mosaic box plot that represents the two-way contingency table of the Pearson's chi-squared analysis. Blue represents the successful nest, red represents the failed nest. On the x-axis, we have the treatment type. To the left, we have food addition. To the right, the control group. On the y-axis, we have the status of nest success. And according to our chi-squared analysis, there were significant differences between nest success of the food addition group versus the control group, hence answering the first part of our main research question. The second part of the main research question was to look into productivity. These are violin box plots. These wavy lines represents the density of the data, and nested within these violins are your box plots, and these represents the median values. According to our model, there were significant differences between productivity versus the control group and the food addition group. So this answered the second part of the main research question. It was very important to account for bias, and a source of that bias could have been clutch size. According to our model, this passed the test. There were no significant differences between the control group and the food addition group. This means that we have equal footing. Another source of bias could have been the number of young hatched, and according to our model, this passed the test. There were no significant differences between the control group and the food addition group. Again, equal footing. We were surprised with this outcome with brood reduction. We expected that there would be significant differences between brood reduction with the control group and the food addition group. Even though there looks like there might be a trend, this was not significant. And we believe that this was the case due to the frequency and intensity of the food addition experimental application. Perhaps if we increased frequency more concurrently, more daily, we would have detected a clear signal. Pre-species composition consisted of 39% menhaden, 10% Atlantic herring, 6% croaker, 6% gizzard shad, and 5% spot. So to close the loop with our analysis, this is very important also because this is what we're going to be handing over to fisheries management. Here is this question. How much added fish, biomass, energy content needed for ospreys to produce 1.15 young per active nest? Now think about context dependency. This productivity rate is the number needed specifically for Chesapeake Bay in order for the osprey population to reach that minimum break-even point to sustain their population. And we answered this question using generalized linear models. On the x-axis, we have added average fish biomass in terms of grams per day. On the y-axis, we have productivity. This red horizontal dotted line represents the productivity rate needed. This vertical red dotted line represents the added average fish biomass needed to produce this productivity rate. And that came out to be 63.4 grams per day per nest. According to our model, this was significant. Likewise, we looked into the added average fish energy in terms of kilocalories per day to acquire this needed minimum break-even point of productivity. And that number came out to be 121 kilocalories. And according to our model, this was significant. So how does this study stack up to historical benchmarks? This was from a study for the post-DDT recovery of ospreys by Beauregard et al. For populations in southern New England and Long Island. These lines here represent different osprey populations in this area. Also, the minimum break-even point at that time was set at 0.8. What we must pay close attention to is during the 60s and 70s, when the productivity rate was below 0.8, where there were noted population crashes. You can see that the productivity rate was approaching 0.5. For the control group in my study, the productivity rate was 0.47, which was below that historical benchmark and below the productivity rate when populations were crashing during DDT. We should be alarmed. Again, context dependency. The productivity rate needed for Chesapeake Bay is 1.15 young per active nest. And for the food addition group, it was 1.13. The estimated world osprey population is 100,000. Here at Chesapeake Bay, we have the world's largest breeding population of ospreys at 20,000. This is the world's stronghold population of ospreys, and it's something that we need to protect. It is an ecological treasure. As we face the Anthropocene and climate change, we need to conserve this stronghold. But with a productivity rate at 0.47, will the population be able to sustain themselves? Recall this figure. Again, the added average risk biomass needed to produce that productivity level. Again, important to give this information over to harvest policy. What is the biomass threshold needed per day per nest? And that comes out to be 208 grams, or about half a pound per day per nest, to reach that target productivity rate. Likewise, recall this figure with the added average fish energy. For harvest policy, what is the energy threshold needed? That comes out to be 347.6 kilocalories per day per nest. Ospreys are sensitive indicators or ecological reference points of menhaden availability. And as we observe and watch the osprey population within Chesapeake Bay, we must pay close attention to this productivity rate if they are hitting this target. Even within the brood, you can see the deleterious effects of food limitation. Here is the elder with a food crop in good body condition, the middle with no crop and emaciation, and unfortunately, the youngest died. In conclusion, ecological reference points are described as a method to assess the status of menhaden, not only with regard to the sustainability of human harvest, but also with regard to their interaction with predators and the status of other prey species. How is the menhaden abundance the interaction in regard to ospreys? Here are all the people I'd like to thank, and the institutions and organizations, literature cited. Thank you so much. I would like to open up the floor now to your comments and questions.